Good evening. My name is Ann Thompson, a member of the League of Women Voters of Larimer County. Welcome to the Forum for Pooter School District Board candidates. Though the candidates represent specific geographic areas within the school district, all voters will vote on these board seats. As a nonpartisan organization, the League never supports or opposes any candidate or political party. For nearly 100 years, and that'll happen next year, a large part of the League's mission has been to educate and inform voters, hoping to increase their participation in government at all levels. Members involved in education and voter registration events are committed to remaining unbiased. The League may take stands on issues that are pertinent to their positions, which are the result of extensive study. Thank you to the City of Fort Collins for helping make this forum possible. This election is a mail ballot election. Ballots will be mailed to voters no later than Friday, October 18th. 24-hour drop-off boxes will be available at City Hall, Harmony Library, CSU's Laurie Student Center beginning October 11th. Beginning November 1st, King Soopers and Safeway stores will have ballot boxes available with limited hours until the election day, November 5th. This information and information about other voting options are available on the Larimer County website and will be included in the mailed ballot. A brief review of our format. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes for an introduction. This is an opportunity to include any biographical information that may be useful to voters. After these opening statements, I will pose questions that have been submitted by members of the audience and screened by League of Women Voters members to avoid duplication. In turn, candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Responses will be timed for fairness. At the conclusion of the question-answer period, each candidate will be asked to make a closing statement of 1.5 minutes. So let's begin with introductions. Why are you running? And what skills or experience do you bring to this position? And Mr. Anderson, we'll start with you.
The benefits of being Mr. Anderson. I decided to run because of the different volunteering that I have been doing throughout the district and the state for a while for education, and it felt like the natural next step. I have been in Fort Collins for almost 16 years here. I have 2 daughters in the Pooter School District, both in high school this year, freshman and a senior. And so I started, volunteering with my oldest in her first grade classroom, and got involved in the school at the time, and had been volunteering in classrooms for a long time, and then got sucked into our parent-teacher organization and headed that up for a few years. Got involved with our district advisory board and the district accountability committee, our school accountability committee, and all of those gave me other views and insight to our education system in our school district and in Colorado. And it really drove me to try to want to make things better and make sure that I was giving kids all the opportunities that they could have. And so that's kind of kept pushing me through, and that's why I kind of got more involved and ended up deciding to run for the school board also with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Schoenbauer.
Yes, my name is Scott Schoenbauer, and I've lived here in Fort Collins for 29 years. It's kind of scary to think. I came out here to go to college at CSU, did my undergrad there in management, grad in marketing, and I currently am a general manager of a promotional products company here in Fort Collins. My wife and I have 3 children that are all, one's actually out of Pooter School District. She is now a sophomore in college, but she went through all the elementary school at Johnson. She went to Weber Middle School and Rocky Mountain High School. My middle son is a senior at Rocky, and my youngest is a 7th grader at Weber. I really wanted to. I've been involved with my kids mostly from a coaching standpoint, seeing the what can happen when you really work with kids, work on their confidence, that type of thing, and help them achieve their goals. So I've been involved with all 3 kids in that standpoint and their classmates. My interest in the school board really is about business outreach, partnership with businesses in Fort Collins, and helping kids be prepared for real world experience and having those life skills when they leave.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan.
Yes, thank you, Ann, and thanks to the League of Women Voters of Larimer County for holding this candidate forum. My name is Nate Donovan, and I'm running for re-election to the Pooter School Board in District B as in Bravo. I've served the last 4 years, and I'm running for re-election, happen to be unopposed, but I wish there would have been another candidate running so that we could have had some good debates. I'm running to make a contribution to the Pooter School District community in Northern Colorado, the state of Colorado, and public education generally. I think it's important for people to give back to their community and try to make a little bit of a difference. The skills I bring, my current adventure is serving as a school bus driver in a neighboring school district just south of Fort Collins. And I absolutely love serving as a school bus driver. Every day is a learning and teaching moment, and the kids are just full of promise, and we make lots of progress one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 year at a time. I also served for 20 years as a practicing attorney, and so I bring those skills to policymaking. And I ask for your support and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Yes, my name is Rob Peterson. I'm running for re-election to the Poudre School District Board of Education because there is no more important calling than to help raise our children to have the knowledge and skills necessary to become healthy and productive members of our community, our nation, and our world. Together, your current board has an excellent mix of skills and background to help partner with and guide the district in this critical mission. My part in this mix includes significant background knowledge in the district, comfort and familiarity with data, willingness to listen and to see multiple sides of an issue or question, and an ability and willingness to ask insightful and probing questions. I come by these skills through over 17 years of volunteering at the classroom, school, and district levels, over 32 years as a software engineer and manager, and 29 years as a parent. I look forward to continuing to apply this background, serving the students and staff of this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson.
Hi, I'm Naomi Johnson, and I am running to hold my seat on the school board. I was appointed in February, and it has really been a joy and a privilege to work with the board and the school district to make great things happen for all of our students. My background is in education, and I like to say, because it's true, that I've devoted my entire adult life to public education. I worked as a high school teacher for 12 years. And then I moved on to working at the University of Northern Colorado in the teacher education program, helping to prepare other young people to be educators themselves. I believe that there is nothing more important than educating our children. We are literally preparing the future citizens of our country and world, and that is an awesome responsibility in every sense of the word. I myself have 3 very young children, sort of different than the gentleman on the panel here with me. My children are 4, 6, and 8. My youngest is not going to graduate high school until 2033. here in Pooter School District. So I am firmly committed to ensuring excellent things are going on in this educational system, not only for my own children, but for all of the children that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Now we'll move to the first question, and we will begin, Mr. Schoenbauer, with you. So this one is related to the big topic of money. So I would like for you to please give your 90-second elevator speech to teach voters how and where money comes from to operate schools, especially federal money, state money, local taxes. How would you explain where money comes from to fund the public schools?
That's a great question. So the main thing about public education is it's funded by the public. We all contribute with our tax money, our property taxes, those types of things. And so the big challenge here in Colorado is there are certain things that have put limits on the taxpayers' spending, which has led to some underfunding that we're seeing. And you see that with the Gallagher amendment. That's a big trouble spot, and something that needs to really be relooked at in terms of the funding because of the formulas that are used to put together that public funding. So I think there's a big push to change that. There's a lot of talk about changing Tabor. I'm a little more cautious about that because I think Tabor has done some good things. I think there are some unintended consequences when you get rid of something that allows the voters to vote on what their money goes towards. And so I think if we get rid of Tabor completely, then you end up where we become California, where everything is just spend, spend, spend. So I think there's an approach, and from the business perspective, the skill set I have in looking at budgets and finding leaks where there are places to save money, I think can also help a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan.
Yes, thank you. I would say that money to fund public schools comes from primarily three different sources. Federal money, Congress appropriates money. Big portion is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's special education funding, and there are several requirements that go along with that. Other federal money is known as title money, and that's money to individual school districts to help at-risk students, especially students that may not be achieving and growing up to grade level. And I happen to drive a school bus to a title school south of Fort Collins, so I work with several students in that program. Then there's state money. State sales and income tax is combined with local property taxes, and the state legislature decides on an annual basis how that money is distributed to schools. And in the Pooter School District, the amount of money per student that our schools get is around $8,000 per student per year, which isn't very much, and we're operating a very quality district on a shoestring budget, and something has to change because we're at a tipping point.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat what the other gentlemen have said. I'll just add to it that there is another source of funding, and that is when we go out for mill levies and bond appropriations here locally in Pooter School District. The taxpayers in the school district have the opportunity to give us additional funding beyond that which is provided by the state. We happen to be going for a mill levy this year in support of teacher salaries, which I strongly support. And I agree with Mr. Donovan that we certainly have a challenge here in the state, generally speaking, about the level of funding that we have for all of the needs of our students, ranging from academic to special ed to mental health support. It's very different in the schools now than it was when I was in school some 45 or so years ago, forgetting how long it is. or maybe I just don't want to remember. Anyway, there are a lot of needs, and we are being as fiscally responsible and transparent with our use of dollars as we can be, and we're always open to having folks ask us questions about that and share with us, and have us share with them the knowledge that we have.
I think it's sort of serendipitous that you asked this question because the money comes today. October 2nd is Student Count Day in Pooter School District, and we literally count every little body we have in our classrooms, report that number to the state, and that is how our funding starts, by figuring out who is coming to our schools. And then we have the responsibility to do something with that money. And what we do with that money is going to depend on the students that we have in our classroom. As Mr. Patterson said, sometimes that money is because students have special needs that we need to address. As Mr. Donovan said, sometimes that money comes from title programs that we have to support students with. But really, it comes from the children who are in our classrooms. That's where the money comes from. And so we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to provide an outstanding education for those students, because if parents felt like their students were not getting a quality education, they would leave, and so would the money. So it is vitally important that we are providing education that is going to prepare our students for the future. Otherwise, parents are going to recognize that, and they're going to seek out another opportunity for their kids, rightfully so.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, so this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and so 90 seconds is a little tricky. Some of the things that have been mentioned quite a bit already is about our property taxes and sales tax. And I want to make sure that we point out that at one time we paid for our own schools about 60% local property tax and 40% state tax. And that has switched. We flip-flopped that. And we continue, and Fort Collins is very fortunate, and PSD, that our voters have stood up constantly and approved good quality mill levy overrides, because we are we're very efficient with our money, and we take good care of it. And I think that the voters have continually trusted us, and we've done really well with that. And it's sad that we have to keep doing that. And there needs to be a change statewide that fixes that. Luckily, 4A is, again, something that we can do locally and step up and take care of some of the problems. Federally, there are other problems that need to be taken care of. And our own congressman was the IDEA, which Mr. Donovan had mentioned earlier, it has been asked to go to, the House voted on it to get us another $1 billion to that. It's still sitting on the Senate floor and hasn't been voted on. So there's things like that that still need to be done to help us all out.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. So next question is related. Several people have mentioned the mill levy. So here's the question, and it is on the ballot. I believe you mentioned 4A. For an increase, why does Pooter School District need a mill levy increase? And we'll start with you, Mr. Donovan.
The Pooter School District community needs a mill levy increase, additional property taxes. The ballot question is for $18 million of additional property taxes for helping make starting teacher salaries competitive, because we've fallen behind every other neighboring district, and we're losing young teachers. We're losing teachers who are starting out. We're losing young teachers. We're losing mid-career professionals. We just heard from a teacher on Sunday that she and her husband, who also teaches in the district, have 5 additional jobs that they go to between the two of them. You have rideshare people that go to their rideshare job after school, and that saps the energy that we should be having them put into educating our students to be productive members of society. The stress level is palpable, and we can't continue like this and have the quality instruction that we've enjoyed over these last many years. And the Pooter School District community has been very supportive, and it's a credit to the voters and the taxpayers that they have been so supportive. And like I said before, we're at a tipping point, and it's very serious.
Yeah, I'll just re-emphasize what Mr. Donovan said about the fact that our starting teacher salaries are below those of neighboring districts. The net of that is a teacher who's starting out is going to look at least partially at what the salaries are and say, I can make more just down the road. So why do I want to apply to Pooter School District? We need to rectify that, and 4A will help us do that. I want to point out other destinations for funding from 4A. One of them is mental health supports. We'd like to have more mental health professionals in our schools and our district, and we need that because the stresses that our students are facing and bringing to the classroom are ever growing. We have high expectations for our students. Sometimes parents have very high expectations for their students, which is not a bad thing, but sometimes that translates into very stressful situations for our students, and they need to be able to deal with that. As you all know, social media is a big piece of our world these days, and bullying and other kinds of stress come through social media platform 24 hours a day now. And finally, and very unfortunately, suicides and self-harm kinds of activities are also on the increase. And so we need more mental health supports, and 4A will help us do that also. Thank you.
So we've been talking a lot about salaries, and one of the things that I want to talk about specifically, Mr. Anderson mentioned that school funding has changed quite a bit, and when we went through the recession and the school funding was cut, teachers took that cut. They took freezes on their salary schedules. They weren't getting their promised years of service pay. They weren't getting increases in their education levels. And so we owe it to them. We owe them the service that they have provided us. We should pay for that service. I saw something online that I thought was kind of kitschy. It said, we don't have a teacher shortage problem. We have a shortage of master's level professionals who are willing to work for less than $40,000 a year. I mean, we've all talked about how incredibly important education is, and I think that this is our chance to say those people who are on the front lines, who are preparing our children to go out and serve the community in various ways, our future surgeons, our future police officers, our future plumbers, we're going to treat you as the professionals you are, and we're going to make sure that you're compensated as such. And this is the way that we have to do it because of all of the funding cuts that we have experienced. So I am enthusiastically in support of this mill levy. Thank you.
I've been working hard on this mill levy. I think it is very important that we make sure that we take the right steps to take care of our teachers and staff. I want to make sure we point out that this is also taking care of the people that work in the lunchrooms, the janitors, the people that work on school buses. This is an opportunity because these are all people that have connections with our students. These are people that we need to make sure that we're taking care of because they're taking care of our students. And the big one that was mentioned a little bit earlier too is the counseling or social emotional needs area. I truly believe that, having counselors, full-time counselors in all of elementary schools is a priority, and I think that trying to find money for that is difficult, and so this is an opportunity for us to do something about that. Having that connection to those students pays off all the years down the road, and I think that it is vital that we invest our money wisely. And I think, it's a people business. Most of our budget is for salaries. And so it's good that we are making sure that we get the best and we're paying for the best. Another story that I had just heard recently is a teacher that gave his notice because he got offered a job 3 times as much as he was doing for teaching. So those are opportunities that we need to step up on.
I'm in agreement with everybody here that teachers in this district are severely underpaid, and it's an embarrassment, frankly, that we're in Northern Colorado, we're the lowest school district, lowest paid school district. I worry a little bit on the mill levy that we're going to repeat a mistake that's been made in the past, in that the business community has not bought in to this. If you read it, they're going to take on a pretty big burden of that $18 million, and there's a lot of pushback that you'll probably see from the business community on that. And I feel like my experience and my relationships with other people in that community maybe could give me some credibility in talking to them and helping to sell the idea of this. To people involved in the school district, it's a no-brainer. Obviously, our teachers need, and our staff needs to be paid better, but I don't think it's been sold as well as it needs to get that buy-in from the business community. One other thing on mental health, one area that I've been really looking at studies and things like that, is the impact of social media on our kids' mental health. I'm a big advocate for getting rid of cell phones in the classroom, at the very least putting them in a storage area during class for distraction-free learning. I think that also will help wean them away from social media and the type of bullying and comparisons that they do with each other that leads to depression. So I'm a big advocate for that.
Thank you. Now I'm going to drill down just a little bit on some of the things that you've brought up. Let's start with this idea of the mill levy will help support additional mental health staff. I'm going to ask that you be more specific. What kind of mental health staff, at what levels are planned for this increase? If you could start and make some comments about that, Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, so there are multiple needs in the system. We currently have schools with varying levels of support in the schools. Some of them, most schools have counselors, a few do not. Some schools have school psychologists, many do not. Some schools have social workers, many do not. I think we need to look carefully at the distribution of resources within the schools to ensure that every student has the mental health support that he or she needs to succeed, to be healthy, and therefore to be able to learn well. I think that the specifics of that are a discussion that the board and the administration are going to have at a retreat in February of 2020, when we know, in fact, whether we have the mill levy support that we're asking the public for. And so I talked about what's the situation in the schools. We also have crisis response teams at the district level who, when a student has experienced a trauma, or the staff and the schools need support, come in and help. That also needs bolstering. That would be my answer.
So I think that, when we talk about mental health, sometimes it seems like it's an optional thing, which seems strange to me because we all have brains and we all have feelings and we all need help with that. But what that looks like is going to be different for everyone. I'd like to see a full-time counselor in every elementary school. We talk about having early intervention for educational needs because the gap is never smaller than when they are young. Well, the same is true for our mental health identification, and being able to identify early mental health concerns are going to help our students in experiencing less of the impact of that as they get older. So that's certainly where I think we should start. How the rest of it gets put together, I agree, is going to be based on what the needs are of our students. We might not need to have a social worker in every school, but we do need to have access to a social worker for every school, and something that's not at something that's not at an unmanageable caseload level for those professionals as well. So I think that step one is making sure that all of our students have services available, and step two is the equitable distribution of those services.
First, I'd like to say ditto. If you want to go back and just listen to that, she did a great job. I want to point out that the Association of Mental Health Specialists, their recommendation is one counselor per 250 students. That is a goal that would be wonderful to get towards. I have talked about the full-time counselors in elementary schools, but when it comes down to exactly how the money is going to be used, one, it's not a great windfall, but it is some money, is that we got to look at that we are site-based. So we have to work with our schools and our administration and figure that out. Right now, there isn't a set area for sure that it's going to go towards, because there are needs throughout the system. And we've got to prioritize the right ones and figure out how to make sure that we use the money the best way that we can. One of the other challenges in this area is there's not always enough people to hire for these different roles. And so sometimes we might want a certain role, but we can't get that hired. Maybe then we use the money in a different way. So there are options out there, but I can guarantee you it's going to be used for social and emotional needs, because there is a big need for it. And this, like I said, it is just a little chunk to help us.
Yeah, I am in agreement with everybody here on that as well. I think the way you'd have to do it would be similar to how we handle our SROs, where you have some rotation. You can't necessarily afford to have a counselor at every school. It would be nice, but I think, like DJ was saying, that we have limited resources. So going back to what I was saying earlier, it may seem like a small thing, taking the cell phones out of schools and things like that, but I see it more as a wellness approach to mental health. If we can get back to having human conversations with other humans rather than our phones, and if we can get people away from always comparing what their life looks like to the perfect life they're seeing on their phones, I think that can really help change people's mental outlook on life and how their life is going so far. So I think that wellness approach, just like in business, when people put wellness programs into their companies, it's a lot less expensive than the lost time of sick employees and things like that. So that would be a big part. I think educating the kids, making it okay to go to a counselor. I think there's a big stigma out there about that we'd have to overcome, and I think that would be some of the funding would need to go into a program that could help kids know that it's okay to go see the counselor that's rotating around the district.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Mr. Schoenbauer on the wellness approach, but this idea that we're going to have cell phones disappear from the educational environment, I think, is a little naive. What are we going to do? Have bus drivers have baskets on their dashboard that everyone puts their phone in, and then when students get off the bus, they take somebody else's phone and don't take their phone, and pretty soon we've got fights about whose phone belongs to who. I just think we have to think through a bigger picture about how mental health in our schools is manifesting itself. As far as how much and what, the 4A proposal is for $18 million. Right off the top comes $1.3 million in sharing on a per-student basis with charter schools. So the charter schools share in this, and I would hope that every charter school supports this and asks their community to support this, because they're going to benefit directly if the voters approve this. So that leaves about $16.7 million, and I would say that although we're going to have discussions in February, it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10% of that $16.7 million would be used for mental health services and also school safety and security.
Thank you. So on a bit of a positive note now, we've talked about money quite a bit and mental health issues in schools, and we may come back to that. But I would like for each of you, starting with Ms. Johnson, to describe a really great experience that you've had while visiting one of the classrooms in the Pooter School District.
Oh, I got this one. So one of the things I was most excited about when I was appointed to the board was the ability to visit schools. And so I'm going to take this from a broad approach because every school is unique and every school has different ways of reaching the needs of the unique little people sitting in the classroom. And so that might look like when I was at O'Day and walking by the library and there were students singing their songs, or when I was at Tavelli and they were, the children were explaining to me how, traffic is a real big problem out in front of our school with the bus drop-off. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a project to design a new bus drop-off system, and then we're gonna go present that to the city. And as a teacher, man, that gave me all of the warm fuzzies, because I'm looking at these children, identifying problems that they're seeing in their world, and then trying to come up with solutions to them. And there is nothing more amazing than people coming to their own conclusions about things. So I think that you're going to see amazing things in all of these schools, and I hope that we're open to what amazing looks like in different ways.
One of the most rewarding experiences that I've had is volunteering in the schools, and working with first graders, which was called their nightly readers, and they would take them home and then they'd read them and then they'd come back and they'd read it to me, and then I would help decide if they would move on to a new book, different level and stuff like that. And I had a little guy who, at his home, they didn't speak English. And so when he came back, we got to work through that book, and seeing him on a weekly basis and seeing the changes and how he progressed through it is something that I've carried around for a few years, about how much just my little bit of time that I got to spend with him made a difference. And it's the value that I've always talked about with volunteering, is that you can make such a big difference in someone's life. And I'm not sure if he made a bigger difference in my life or if I made a bigger difference in his, but it's something that has always touched me and I've held close.
Yeah, I don't know if it'd necessarily be a classroom, but really the whole school experience at Johnson Elementary School really strikes home for me, and it's a special place for sure. And they've gone through a few principals since my oldest went through there, but there's a consistent focus on what they call Johnson Pride, and not sure if I remember what every letter of pride stands for, but it's an acronym for different things you want to participate. Let's see, there's participation, there's I'm trying to remember some of the insist on safety, things like that. So there's a real focus on kind of a mission statement, basically, that they have, that they make it really easy for the kids to relate to. And I remember going to some of the assemblies. They're called a Pride Assembly, and you get a Pride Award if you have exemplified one of these traits. And that was a much sought after thing among my kids and their peers. And when they got recognized in front of their peers, it was a big, big deal. And so I think Johnson's done a great job of instilling that and making kids be the best that they can be, or making them want to be the best that they can be. And it's impressive to see those kids get into it.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little different tack on this. I would say it's a great experience because it's an illustration of why we do what we do. But for 2 years prior to my election to the school board, I served as a school bus driver in the Pooter School District. And one of the schools that I chose to ask for a school bus route to drive was into Putnam Elementary School from Blue Spruce Drive. And these were some of the most highly impacted students in that school and in the school district. And these students had housing insecurity and their families. They were housing insecure and food insecure. And then later, after I got appointed to the school board, I took a tour with Mr. Apodaca and other staff at Putnam and visited the coordinator of the McKinney-Vento backpack program for Putnam Elementary. And I used to have students bring these backpacks of food onto the school bus to take home with them once or twice a week. And another student I had, their family had moved around several times, and finally they were able to afford to move into a mobile home. And they were so thankful that finally they had a place to call home. And that student told me that she had moved around 7 times that she had known of, and she was in first grade. She knew of 7 different places that she'd lived.
Yeah, I'll share a specific example, but I want to say first that I've had a lot of really very interesting and exciting visits to all kinds of classes. I've seen art classes, I've seen history classes, I've seen culinary arts classes, I've seen reading classes in elementary school. I've seen the result of classwork in many musical performances and dramatic arts kinds of performances. And all of that has been very inspiring. The specific example I'll give, though, right at the minute is one of visiting a math class at Preston Middle School. At Preston, this math class was a co-teaching experiment, which I think has gone very well. That is, 2 teachers and 2 classes of students were mixed together and worked well together. The benefits of having 2 teachers working with those students, each teacher brings different skills to the task and is able to reach different students at different times. They can support each other in the classroom. I also saw in that classroom students, when it was not sort of lecture time or working with the teacher time, they were working at their own pace on computers and using also in groups, using the whiteboard desks that they have to work out their problems and whatnot. It was actually very inspiring, and I want to say that one of the things I appreciate about the teachers in this district is their willingness to be innovative and to consider solutions like that that are to the benefit of our students.
Thank you. Those are some encouraging stories. Now let's move to another topic, and that is school security. I think I'll make this a 2-part question. I think we have enough time to answer both of these parts in one. First of all, what improvements should the Pooter School District make in school security? And as a part of that, would you talk about the best way to handle whether or not and when the school should notify parents when there has been a bullying or especially a threatening incident. And we'll start with Mr. Anderson.
I think one of the biggest opportunities for us to make a difference is making the connection with the students. And part of that is making sure that we don't have our classes super large, that we make sure that we have staff that can be in there and make those adult-student connections so that we can see before a situation might get too heavy or too bleak, that we maybe can address it. I really think that is part of our security measures that is vital and important. We've done a really good job of making a single entry and making sure we've got buzzers on schools and all that stuff, but it's that people connection that I think is still an opportunity for us. The second part of the question I would say is I'm all about partnership with our parents to educate our kids. So it is not a time where you just drop off your kids and let the school teach it and then they come home and don't worry about it. I really believe that parents and schools need to work together to educate our kids, and that's also then with situations that might arise. So if it comes up, I think there definitely needs to be communication with the parents that are in the situation, and we have to hold it. We have to make sure that our principals and counselors know the best route for how much we want to take that broad to all of our parents, because there are certain times that will just counteract any positively effects.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is definitely an important issue for me. I think improvement-wise, there have been some improvements that have happened recently. Obviously, the single entry, that type of thing. You worry a little bit about that on these hot August days that we had, where maybe protocols broken when doors are propped open just to get some ventilation. So that's a whole nother issue. But there are a few things that definitely need to happen. There needs to be upgrade to the communication systems inside the schools. There's a lot of dead zones in some of the high schools, especially the bigger buildings, so that if there is an incident and emergency responders are in there, there have been definite situations in tests and things like that where they can't communicate because of dead zones. So I think relatively inexpensive improvement to that can be implemented. Intercom systems, there's some schools where the intercom wiring is all outside and exposed. It could be cut by somebody with nefarious intent. So there needs to be improvements on those types of things. Bigger deal for me, though, I really think this is something that it's expensive, but I think it's something that the community would get behind, is having an SRO in every school full-time. That's a big expense, but the safety and security of our kids is priceless. So to me, I think that you could get the community behind that. Our banks are full-time secured by full-time guards. Why aren't our schools?
As far as the question and the recent response about school resource officers in every building, it comes down to funding. School resource officers are expensive, and unless the Pooter School District community is going to trade $100,000 or $150,000 for a school resource officer with some other priority, like a new curriculum adoption for math or 2 teachers, a two full-time equivalent teachers, it's going to be hard to do. And the way we currently fund school resource officers is the Pooter School District funds half of the cost, and either the city of Fort Collins for schools within the city limits, the city of Fort Collins funds the other half, or for outside of the city limits of Fort Collins, it's Pooter School District funds one half, and the Larimer County Sheriff's Department funds the other half. So it's partnerships with those agencies and maintaining a chain of command that when there's a crisis, there is one person in charge and there's not a question about how this situation is going to be dealt with. It's a team approach.
Yeah, first I'd like to point out that there have been some significant improvements in the security situation over the past several years. We have increased the number of SROs in the district in partnership with the city and Larimer County Sheriff's Office. We are currently working on upgrading the communication systems, as was pointed out, so there have been some problems with that. We've been working on refining our drills with both the staff and the students so that they know what to do in the case of an actual emergency. We have installed secure entrances in every school, and we have improved protocols to keep eyes on students of concern who might be also in the school. I would also point out that we have been able to increase, to some degree, mental health professionals, and that is part of the, in my view, part of the prevention activity that's really critical to avoiding serious safety and security issues in our schools. I believe in terms of what we need to do going forward, as I've mentioned earlier, mental health is a key thing, and we need to increase our support in that area for prevention. To the extent that we can get partnership with the city and the sheriff's office to add more SROs, certainly as backup to the ones that are there so there aren't holes when people are on vacation or other things like that. I think that's a good idea also. And let me just quickly answer the other question. I think parents need to be told promptly when there's a security or safety issue while respecting the privacy of the students and the staff involved in anything that is happening.
Like most things, I think that this comes down to prevention, and I think that that is the best use of our dollars, is to help prevent security risks from entering our building. And the biggest thing that we can do, like Mr. Anderson said, is making sure that we've got great connections between our kids. We want to have a caring adult have a relationship with every child. And that isn't always going to be a teacher. That might be a school bus driver. It might be a custodian. It could be the child nutrition worker. But if the children feel safe and feel like they can go to an adult in the building and report, I'm feeling something, I'm thinking something, I heard something, that's going to be the most important step that we can take. And second to that is, I think that it's really important that we remember that we're dealing with children. All of the people that we're talking about here are children who don't have a fully formed brain, let alone know what to do with it. These are people who need to be taught. They need to be given the opportunity to make a change in their behavior. And while I'm not advocating for leniency for terroristic threats, I am saying let's take a step and look at why this child is saying this and what we can do to help him or her feel safe so that they don't need to go to that extent.
Thank you. And now I would like to move to some questions about the teaching profession and teachers. So we'll start off with Mr. Schoenbauer. What do you think are the biggest challenges, 3 or 4, facing teachers today?
That's a great question. There's a heavy, heavy burden that our teachers are shouldering right now. I think, we've talked about pay. I think that's probably the number one. To attract the best people, you need to be able to compensate it, make it make sense. I've talked to dozens of teachers as I've gotten more and more involved in the school district, and have been amazed by the quality of people that we have here. And they're not motivated by money, but they need to be able to live a comfortable life, at least, something where they're not having to work multiple jobs and that type of thing. So So that's the number one challenge. I think the other is the amount of work that's been kind of pushed down the line onto their shoulders, where they're spending a lot more time doing administrative things rather than the actual teaching in the classroom, the lesson planning, those types of things. I think there's a lot of teachers that are frustrated because they just have to go with whatever lesson plan they did last year rather than updating it because they just don't have time. So I would say that challenge is a significant one as well. And then being recognized for that extra effort. There's an internal motivator, but there can be external motivators, and that's another positive thing I see with the partnership with businesses, where you can really enhance the award system that's already been put in place. There should be more awards for extraordinary teachers, and we have a lot of them in this district.
Yes, I'd like to point out one thing that I think is a challenge is increasingly teachers having to deal with a wide range of students at different points in their growth in the same classroom and figure out how much time to spend with each student and still have a cohesive learning environment. I think that's a big challenge. I mean, there are many students that don't have an IEP that are in that classroom, and they're all at different points in their learning of the subject matter that's being taught, and there are behavior issues. So I would think that would be one. Mr. Schoenbauer also mentioned teacher pay, and the mental health issue that Mr. Anderson had talked about, I think, is a big one. Another one I would say is burnout. The time that is spent on non-classroom activities is substantial. Grading papers, preparing lesson plans, it's all part of what teachers have been doing for a long time, but there are so many other demands on their time that it makes it hard for them to prioritize where to put their efforts.
Yeah, a lot of it's been said. I'll say in summary, I guess, the ability of a teacher to support him or herself and live in the community in which the teaching is done is a key piece. The size of classrooms and the caseload of teachers, particularly in the middle school and high school, they have 180 and plus students that they see over the course of their classes that they teach. That's a lot of students to get to know and to help learn. The ability to, given the size of the classrooms and the caseload, the ability to differentiate to meet the needs of each student where he or she is at is a very difficult thing. There was a brief mention Mr. Donovan made of behavior challenges in the classroom. There are some times when kids act out in the classroom and yet the teaching is still supposed to go on. That the ability to manage that classroom and take care of the needs of the student who might be acting out or get help to do that places a challenge on our teachers. And I'll also just mention, again, reemphasizing the mental health and emotional needs of our students. They are more needy than they have been in the past for some of the reasons we've already mentioned, and the teachers often have to respond to that.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
So kind of piggybacking a little bit on what some of the other gentlemen here have said, one of the things that I find really frustrating is when people say, well, if you went into teaching, you must have known that you weren't going to be making a lot of money. And I'd also just like to say that Amazon didn't turn a profit the first several years that they were in business. We're dealing with people who deserve to be compensated for the mountain of work that they are doing. And there's so much that they're trying to do. I've got maybe 30 or 40 students in my class, and here are some who haven't eaten breakfast, and here are some who are homeless, and here are some who are reading 3 grade levels above where we are learning, and here are some who are reading 3 grade levels below what we're learning. Now prepare everyone for the standardized test. It's just outstanding, the work that these teachers are able to accomplish, and they do it. They do it every day, and they do it excellently. And I think that we need to also take a step back and recognize what all of these teachers are able to accomplish with the massive circus that they are handed. And, you know, we're not going to be able to solve all of those problems. But I think that if we look at it and acknowledge it, that that's going to be the first step to teachers feeling as though they're being appreciated for the daunting job that they're doing.
Teachers are amazing. Taking a class and having 20 to 30 students and holding their attention is extremely tough. I've tried it, and I give them a lot of credit. The idea, obviously, that pay is going to be important because they got to take care of their own family also. But I think, again, it's been covered, but it's how much more is on their shoulders than what was years ago is such a big part of the weight that they feel anymore. We talked about security, the security drills that they have to go through now. That is weight on their shoulders and concern. And these teachers, they care about their students. They care about all their students, and that wears on them. And so we got to make sure that we're taking care of them in any ways that we can, financially, making sure that we have a good mental health specialists for them even, and making sure that they're getting the exercise and not having to work multiple jobs and stressing them out. Those are all important to taking care of our employees so that they can take care of our students. You know, the talk of differentiation is such a huge thing too, in the fact that, again, back in the day, we said, here's your plan, go teach it to everyone. And now we're asking them to make sure they're reaching the wide range of students. Thanks.
Thank you. Another aspect of teaching, and we'll start with Mr. Donovan for this question, which has some parts to it. Standardized testing was mentioned. Do you think that education today is too focused on standardized testing with teacher rating based on their students' scores? And what is the best way for teachers to be evaluated? Mr. Donovan.
Yes, I think there is still too much emphasis on test scores as an element of educator evaluations. And I helped develop, along with our Pooter School District Legislative Committee, some proposals for legislative bills that we're going to take to the Colorado Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly in mid-October, and I will be representing the board as its delegate. And one of them is we need to get away from test scores as half of that equation, and it's Senate Bill 191, it's referred to. And what we need to get back to is courageous conversations and sometimes difficult conversations between administrators and teachers about what their goals are, whether they've met their goals, how they're going to get there, and if they have not met their goals, what they're going to do to improve. And it's just it's a shame that we're continually on this hamster wheel of testing when it hasn't shown to improve the classroom and learning experience for students. And so I would be interested in reducing the amount that testing counts toward educator evaluations.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, first thing I'd point out is that we in Pooter School District have a very unique and creative system for evaluating our teachers. Yes, testing is a part of that, but in fact, there are many classes that don't have standardized tests. So how do we evaluate those teachers? The answer is that we have a whole system of levels of ability to evaluate teachers, some with testing, some with individualized plans that they work out with the principal. And we also in Pooter School District look for success for all of our students, or for all of our teachers, well, students too, but in this case, the teachers is what we're talking about. And to the extent that the teacher is, the results from testing in a particular classroom or a particular class are not up to snuff for one reason or another, then we work with the teacher on what success measures are possible for that teacher to demonstrate success and excellence in teaching as well. I would also say, in response to the second part of your question, that relationship and trust with the principal are key, and the assistant principals for that matter, so that they can have the kind of dialogues that Mr. Donovan was talking about, and the teacher can learn and dialogue in a non-threatening environment.
That's okay. I love talking about standardized testing.
The head part of my chart covered it, and I saw SON.
So I think that by and large, the way that the standards are written are really nice, that they cover all of the great information that we want our children to learn. I think that one of the problems that we have is that we rely on a single point of data to demonstrate whether or not these students have learned what we're asking them to learn. And then we use that single point of data as 50% of a teacher's evaluation. Now, it's done differently here in Pooter School District, which I very much appreciate for the teachers here in the district. But I think that there are a lot of things that need to be looked at, and it makes it a much more complicated evaluation system. And the first is we need to make sure that students are growing. We need to know where they started, and we have to have an idea of where we want them to grow. And it would be great if a student could grow one academic year every year. But beyond that, what about our students who are advanced and we want them to grow more than that? What about our students who are below the benchmark? How are we going to help them grow more than a year so that they can get back on track? If a student is 1 year behind in third grade and grows a year, they're still going to be 1 year behind in fourth grade. So it's really important to look at the myriad of things that are out there when trying to decide how to best evaluate teachers.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Anderson.
So as a parent representative, I actually got to sit on the committee when we were working out 191 on how to do it in the school district. And I am extremely proud of what our Pooter School District has come up with. I think it works extremely well to start the conversation, to get that conversation going between the principals, assistant or principal, with the teacher. And that is really the key, is to get the conversation going and figure out what coaching might need to happen. Since, one of the things that we don't look at just one test. There's many opportunities to show success. I think I have been talking to state senator and legislators that maybe this is an opportunity to try to show other school districts a way to do this. To your question about standardized tests, too, I want to make sure, though, that we don't swing the pendulum too far the other way, because I think there is a role for standardized tests. It is a great dipstick to kind of check out to see how our education system is doing, how our schools are doing. It is not, you can't take it and say that shows you everything. It's a little bit of evidence, and you got to make sure you understand it that way. But I do like them for that aspect, to be able to get a picture of that. I do think the tests themselves could be a little shorter though. Thanks.
Mr. Schoenbauer.
Yeah, we see this in the business community too. There's quantitative standards and qualitative standards that you measure people on. When I evaluate my employees, I take a look at that. But with the salespeople, it's easy. Did you make your numbers? Did you sell this month's goal? That's easy. But what do you do with the accountant or the customer service rep, that type of thing? A lot of times I get feedback anecdotally from customers I meet at a trade show who will tell me my customer service reps are fantastic, that type of thing. So in terms of the school system, I think I agree with DJ, there is definitely a place for the quantitative measure of the standardized test. But I think there should be more emphasis on evaluations. I think the principals need to be in the classrooms more. They're oftentimes only in there a couple times, and that's all they have time for because they have so many other responsibilities. I think there's, it can't be just those 2 times. The teacher may have a bad day, or maybe they had a great day, and there's a, misperception of that this teacher's a superstar when in reality maybe they're not. But one thing no one's mentioned that I think is really important, thinking from a customer standpoint, who's the customer? It's the student, right? Why aren't the students evaluating the teachers? That may sound like a crazy idea that, you're going to invite pranksters and things like that, but over time, maybe not just a 1-year evaluation, but over 3 years of evaluations of a teacher, you're going to get a good, solid average. You're going to get rid of the outliers that may be, not taking this seriously, and you're going to find out really how this teacher is affecting these kids. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
Thank you. So this next question will start with Mr. Peterson. And it's going back to this, and several of you have mentioned the wide range of students and the challenges that are presented to teachers by this wide range of students. I want you to talk about 2 particular groups that are included in that wide range. One of which has to do with the fact that our community diversity increases over time. More immigrants, unaccompanied minors, and other. What is the district doing to welcome and support these students? And also, would you also refer to what is the role that schools play in identifying and providing services to those who are economically at a great disadvantage? So diversity and economic disadvantages. What are your thoughts?
Well, the schools currently, we have a director, in fact, who has a department whose responsibility is to outreach to our diverse community, diverse students, and in fact have a series of home liaisons who go into the houses of some of these folks, obviously welcomed into the houses, not imposing themselves, but ensuring that they understand the services and that are available to their students and feel welcomed into the district. We also have training for our teachers to ensure that they recognize the value and can support the full diversity of students that are in the schools. I will say, you talk about economic disadvantage. In fact, if you look at the statistics associated with students who are struggling the most, it is in fact those who are of low socioeconomic status. And in some ways, the best thing we can do for those students is to help them to learn so that they can be successful in school, so that they can be as successful as their peers who come from more economically advantaged situations. And we are seeking to do that. And as you can see from some of the data that has come out recently, we are making strides in that direction, though we have more work to do.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson.
So if I could just continue on that that line of thought with the idea of helping our socioeconomically disadvantaged children, really what it comes down to is the idea that time is money. And if your parents have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to pay all of their bills, they're not going to have the extra time to sit and read a book with their 5 or 6-year-old. They're not going to have the time to sit and play math games with their 10-year-old. And so if we're able to identify those needs, then the schools can offer extra support, be it a club after school, or we could help to find the support in the community for those students with lots of different ideas of partnerships. There are great programs available that can help our students. When it comes to the idea of a culturally diverse student body, I think that that's excellent, and I think that that's only going to help all of our children understand and empathize that people come from different backgrounds and have different things to offer. My own child came home today singing a song in Spanish, and she doesn't attend a bilingual school, but she said that one of her classmates has parents and they speak Spanish, and so the class was learning this song to help everyone feel included. It seems like a really small thing, but these are what our teachers are doing to help support the kids that they have in their classrooms.
So a couple things that were mentioned already too about the liaisons and that, going out there. It's a great program. Again, it's one of those that is limited a little bit by the funding issue. Because the more that we can get out there in partnership with the families, I think that's the next step to take, so that we can grow and make that community even stronger in that way. Because I think my thinking is that we do a pretty decent job in the classrooms about trying to include and get that conversation going. One of the things that's happening with our new reading programs is the books that we chose. We're looking at books that represent more of a diverse community in there, so that you can see yourself in these books. And we feel like that's even important. So I think there are things like that you gotta, it's not something you would come, or at least I didn't think of right away, that I think is great that our experts that are looking at these things are trying to help make a change. But again, I think the idea of trying to make that community feel around the school strong is the biggest step that we can do. I would love to see more liaisons out there so that we can try to build that with the partnerships that are out there in Fort Collins. We have great programs out there, which was mentioned, and we just need to make sure we're getting people in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Schoenbauer.
Yeah, this is definitely an important issue given the growth that's happening in Fort Collins and the diversity that's changed around here. One thing I've been thinking about and have heard some ideas being bounced around is making the school each school in each neighborhood kind of the central place, not just for education, but for services. So you think about this on the weekends. You could have doctors available for basic checkups and maybe some dentistry, that type of thing where, think about the access to the services. There are great services in this town, but you have to have a car to get to them or be able to take an Uber to get to them. That may be too expensive, or they don't have the time to take the bus. So the schools are all strategically placed very close to all these homes. They're a lot of times in walking distance. So if you had those social services, medical services, things like that close by, I think that school becomes more of a hub of the community rather than just, this is where my kids go to school. So that would be an area where, as the school district, we can offer up those buildings that can house a lot of people, have the meeting rooms, have the space to provide these things and help people feel more a part of their community.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan.
Yes, I'd like to point out one of the innovative programs that we've come up with in the last couple of years. It's called the Mobile Academic Classroom. And a school bus was converted to a mobile classroom. It was based at Tavelli Elementary School for a pilot period of time. And then the first summer that it was in operation, it was driven out to Bull Run housing complex out at Vine and Timberline. And I used to drive students on the school bus out to Bull Run, and that's a perfect place. Go where the residents are in their environment, and I think it's been a great success. Several people have mentioned partnerships. There is the backpack program partnership with Colorado State University, and we honor Kathy Pfeiffer and her team every year at the beginning of the year, and it's a great service to the community. Boots and Coats, the backpack program for food insecure families and students. Project Smiles, another one. And then economically disadvantaged students and families end up on our doorsteps, and there's a McKinney-Vento coordinator for the district and at several of the schools where we serve those students and families.
Thank you. Now, we just barely have time for one more question, so I'm going to ask you to be really brief with this question before we do conclusions. And that is, give me one piece of information that you wish voters really understood before they cast their ballots. Just one piece. Ms. Johnson, we'll start with you.
One piece of information that I think voters need before they cast their ballot is the amount that this district is doing to support students and the shortfall that exists and what can be done to solve that.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
I want them to know that their vote is important. That's the one thing that I want everyone to know, and that we really want you to step out and vote. I think that we have done a great job here in Fort Collins area, Timnath, Wellington, of standing up and taking care of our students, and I ask that you continue to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Schoenbauer.
I think it's frustrating, I think, for a lot of people involved in the school district to see the apathy out there. There's the lack of, I think, full buy-in and understanding of just how important an educated student base is and a community really is. And so I think the one thing I would want them to know is why it makes sense in the long run, if we're playing the long game here, why it makes sense to invest fully in our schools and the education. It's a win-win for everybody. There's a huge untapped resource in the business community of money, as well as experiences and real-world things that students can learn, that if we could get the buy-in from that business community, we could really enhance the education here in the district.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan.
I would echo some of the other comments. Elections matter, and decisions are made by people who show up and speak up. So please use your voice, because it matters. We have a great Pooter School District community, and we have an opportunity to make it even better. And it takes all of us working together to further this little crucible of democracy that we call the Pooter School District. So I thank everyone for their time in listening to this, and the League of Women Voters and the candidates up here that are willing to stick their neck out and serve the community.
Yeah, so the one piece of information that I want them to take home is that our teacher salaries are not competitive, and we need to do something to rectify that. Please help us to do so by passing 4A on the ballot.
So that was a great conclusion, but I'm going to give you just a brief conclusion, really brief statement, because we run out of time. And we will start with Mr. Anderson again for that brief conclusion.
When I was appointed to fill Kathy Kipp's spot at the end of February, it did feel like a natural step into the volunteering that I have been doing for schools, teachers, and students. And I hope to continue to do that for the area. I still got a lot of fight in me for making changes statewide too on our education funding. And so I'm going to continue to work on that, and I hope that you will let me continue to serve on the PSD school board.
Thank you. Mr. Schoenbauer.
Yeah, I think you've kind of seen that I kind of have a different approach to things. Just I'm an outsider basically, and looking to bring a part of the community into the school district through the board that maybe hasn't been involved before. So I really want to expand the apprenticeships and the internships that are happening. That's a good thing that is happening in the district, but it could be even better. Merit-based awards, I think that's a big thing that could be done, sponsored by the business community for teachers, help them earn more money that they deserve to earn. We need to attract and retain those teachers. There are things I've seen in the budget. I've been on the Budget Advisory Committee, also the District Advisory Board, and have seen things, really, I don't want to get in the weeds on it, but there's some problems with some of the retirement plan issues, and I think we can bring some expertise in to help avoid a lot of fees that are draining the teachers of money that they've earned on annuities and things like that. You've heard me talk about a wellness approach to mental health. In terms of getting rid of cell phones out of the classroom, I don't want to fully get rid of them. There's plenty of ways to do that. Storage, think of a shoe rack on the back of a door. That's how people do it in a lot of classrooms right now. There's just a major inconsistency about how we handle cell phones in the classroom. So that's something that I think could help with distraction-free learning as well as the wellness approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Patterson, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Donovan.
Yes, thank you, and thanks again to the League of Women Voters and for everyone who takes the time to listen to this program. I ask for your support and your vote for another 4 years on the Pooter School District because I care very deeply about individual students and families, and I love the Pooter School District community, and it's such a gift to work in education. I think that one of the things that's important to mention, in addition to the fact that I would ask for your support of ballot issue 4A, we worked long and hard. It was a long and hot summer to try to put that together, and we think it's a responsible approach for our community. But many of us that work so hard, we do it out of the love for the community, but it's also a lot of pressure to think that 30,000 students and their families and the community are on the shoulders of 3,800 employees and 7 board members and superintendent and the superintendent's cabinet. But it's such a privilege to serve, and I look forward to serving the community for another 4 years. So thank you for your vote, support, and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
So PSD was in many ways a terrific district before I joined the board. In the time since I've been on the board, I've seen the board partner with the administration in supporting the terrific staff of this district to make important progress in many areas, including academic progress, graduation rates, some support for mental health, more opportunities for hands-on learning, fiscal responsibility, accountability, and transparency to the community, among many others. As always, in any great endeavor, there is always more to do, and I look forward to continuing to play my role. Thank you for your support over the years and for continuing to work with us going forward.
And Ms. Johnson.
When I was appointed to the board in February, I was wholly unprepared for the sheer amount of joy that this work was going to bring into my life. And being able to see the students' growth as I have visited their classrooms has been truly amazing. But the real gift is looking at the employees of this district and the joy that they're bringing to the classroom and the passion and innovation that they are showing every day, even given the incredible obstacles that are being placed in front of them. So my hope, when I am continuing on the board, hopefully, is that we are able to get out of the way of those teachers doing the incredible work that they are able to do, and celebrate and support them so that we can continue to have an outstanding education system for all of our children moving forward. Because as I said at the beginning, there is nothing more important than preparing the future of our world.
Thank you. And I want to thank each of the candidates for participating in the forum and your willingness to be a public service. And to the audience and viewers, I would like to say that your vote will make a difference. So please think of this as an investment in the future. I would encourage you to check out vote411.org. That's vote411.org for more information and some additional answers from these candidates. and an appreciation to the City of Fort Collins for allowing us to put on this forum. Thank you and good night.